Hello, guys and gals, and welcome. Ooh, frog in my throat. Finally got some news about 2.5 public test realm and some more. I also have a brand new freaking T-shirt design, which I finally had go up on my Shopify store. So if you guys are interested in picking up a really freaking awesome Chinchillin with Mr. Nimoy T-shirt, I have got you, fam. And not only that, but it changes. The pattern changes depending on what color shirt you get. So if you get like a darker colored shirt, it has a darker colored look to it, and you can get like gray and all sorts of other cool stuff, and it really does look changes the color of the chinchilla, obviously, and the color of Diablo. Um, and if you like my content, be sure to hit the subscribe button, hit the like button. It really helps out. So a couple hours ago, we got some news from Pez Radar, and I'd like to read it to you guys and go over kind of what he said and what we can expect and talk about it a little bit. Hey all, apologies for the silence on the PTR front, but wanted to provide a few updates here. The team was spending the last week going through the survey information and community reports from Public Test Realm. There may be another iteration of Public Test Realm as the team wants to implement some items based off the feedback, but that is still being determined. We are running up against some scheduling timelines and want to make sure we can get 2.5 out of the door sooner rather than later and get Season 2 ladder kicked off sooner rather than later. Extending PTR to continue the test and iterate will, of course, hold those two dates back. We are going to see if we can fit in the existing timeline for now, but if we can't, we may use some of the buffer between patch 2.5 hitting and Season 2 to ensure we can get some additional game time from players on the TerraZone items. So if you guys are unfamiliar with how it happened last time, they dropped 2.4 on us first. They let it sit for about a week or two, and then we got Season start. So they didn't just drop 2.4 on us and then ladder start at the same time. We got one and then the other. So what they're saying is they may drop 2.5 first, give us a little bit of time to test out the features, and then they'll drop ladder on us. Some top level items from the feedback. Players were noticing some zones were kind of not great for terror zones, so expect some to be moved out and some others to be moved in. Sounds like they're going to do a little bit of swip swapping back and forth. They also had mentioned they were going to be adding some more anyway, so who knows how many we will end up with at the end. Players found some of the TZ content to be easy, but we can also determine what characters played on PTR, who offered that specific feedback, and we noticed a lot of this came from Hammerdin players. The team has some ideas on this, and we will be sharing that soon. I expect it to create a bit of a shift in the build/class opportunities for players. Interesting. So they're going to provide some kind of nerf to Hammerdin players for these zones so that it's not so easy. So instead of making the zones harder to accommodate the most overpowered class in the game, they are going to be making the zone harder for the most overpowered class in the game, which is a distinction in terms. So not necessarily harder for everyone, but harder for the specific classes that have it easy. We will have more info or unlock conditions for TZ and how long each zone will be terrorized as well. We appreciate those who offered their thoughts on this. Lastly, I know there were a lot of voices wanting this in single player. I can say that it is being looked into, but for now, I would expect this to be a latter Season 2 feature as we are able to make tweaks to online numbers on the fly, while single player has different values for EXP and it needs to be tuned differently. The desire is high, but we want to get this nailed down for ladder play first, and we'll move into looking at it for offline afterwards. Lastly, I wanted to clear up on the Season 2 timing, as there was a bunch of confusion on this, and honestly, it's 100% understandable why there was confusion. Before Season 1 began, we had noted that we were aiming to have seasons last 4 months. We are obviously past that timeline, and to be 100% honest, we kind of didn't plan very well on our end for that date. Terror Zones was a cool feature we wanted to nail correctly, as it teetered back and forth on the line of should we do this or not. Many times throughout development, and with that, it caused a little bit of a delay on the season transition. I just wanted to state that and apologize for the murkiness around when the season transition would occur. We are looking at mitigating this issue for further seasons in Diablo 2 Resurrected. The current order of operation in this is that we will end PTR here soon and start submission for final builds on 2.5 and get out that to everyone on the live environment. Season 1 to Season 2 will happen fairly immediately. We expect Season 2 to start a week or two after 2.5 hits, so we have a date that everyone is aligned on and knows about. Season 1 will literally end the second we transition to Season 2. For example, Season 1 will go to 4:59 p.m. specific time, and Season 2 will begin at 5:00 p.m. specific time. As more dates become aligned here in the coming week, we will provide updates to give a better window on 2.5 and Season 2 for the community. Interesting. So, I mean, a couple positives that I can take from this. Positive number one, they're definitely reading our feedback. They have, if they are considering delaying Season 2, they have definitely seen our feedback and been like, hey, those are some pretty good ideas. They make some valid points. Let's work on that, right? I mean, they give some of the top-level items from feedback. Players were noticing some zones were not great for terror zones. I'm not really sure about this one because I feel like just about every zone, honestly, is great for terror zones. They just need a little bit of tweaking. Maybe they were specifically referring to the monster density in those zones, and they didn't feel like changing the monster density of those zones, so they were just like, you know what, let's just remove terror zones from these low-density areas and focus on the areas that have higher density or something. But, like, not really sure about that. I didn't really feel like any of the zones were particularly terrible. They just needed a little more to them. Like Travancore was not a big enough zone by itself. It did have a lot of super uniques in it, but like it doesn't really have a lot of monsters in it, like comparatively to other zones. So one of the things I suggested was, you know, adding in the temples that are in the causeway. Add the causeway and the temples in, and that would beef up the zone enough to be large enough to be considered a terror zone. And a lot of the zones were far more than big enough. But some of them had very low density, and that was also a big issue. So I'm not really sure if this is specifically talking about that. Like, I kind of feel like this could be talking about, number one, low density issues. It could also be talking about, number two, the areas weren't really quite big enough. You know, like, so like this zone just didn't really deserve to be a terror zone because it was too small. But to mitigate that, I think it was very clear that all you really had to do was include some of the surrounding zones, like for instance, with, like I said, with Travancore, include the temples, or with Glacial Trail, include Drifter Cavern. I think it was pretty easy to figure out which ones should be together and which ones shouldn't. Players found some of the TZ content to be easy. So, like, they pulled this out, and they're basically like, they found it to be easy. But then they're like, okay, well, we have testing data. Let's see who is saying that this is easy and what character they played on. And they're noticing that the majority of the people who said that the content was easy were playing on Hammerdins, which the Hammerdins were like fully decked out and they were ridiculous. So, I mean, I can understand that. And I'm actually kind of excited about the fact that they're willing to do something to make things a little bit more difficult for the Hammerdins, because quite honestly, the Hammerdin has just always been way too easy to play. I believe the term herder Hammerdin probably applies. Because literally, like, every single time you need somebody that can clear something super duper fast, it's pretty much a no-brainer just to make yourself a Hammerdin. And you don't even really need that great equipment. It's pretty much just plus to skill equipment, concentration aura, hammers, and a good amount of faster cast, and you're golden. You don't even really need teleport, even though some people swear that you need teleport. Honestly, the Hammerdin does just fine without teleport. He's just a little slow. He can charge around. He's all right. And then we also have this, which is kind of a vague statement. We will have more info on unlock conditions for TZ and how long each terror zone or each zone will be terrorized as well. So they're talking about changing the unlock conditions and the TZ. So this is one of the things that I suggested in my original forum post. Not sure if you guys have seen that, but it's a pretty long post, tons of information on there. And one of the things that I suggested was locking the terror zones behind beating Bale in that difficulty setting. So very similarly to the way that the cow level is locked behind beating Bale, that basically you wouldn't be able to create a game that is capable of terror zones until you had cleared like that particular difficulty setting. There may be other clear conditions or unlock conditions that people have stated. I'm not exactly sure, but that was the one that I had suggested, basically making it very similar to the cow level, that you couldn't do it unless you've killed Bale. Now, granted, you can kill Bale relatively early, like as low as like level 24 in normal difficulty. So you would be running TZs like at level 25 in normal difficulty with relative ease. Nightmare difficulty is a different story, but it's not necessarily difficult to kill Bale relatively early in that either. Hell difficulty, of course, would be the real one that is the major issue, and killing Bale in hell difficulty so you can make the TZ zones would be a big deal. I feel like that would be a pretty cool one, just like finally getting access to hell cows. So apparently a lot of people offered thoughts on this, which is basically what I was saying. I think a lot of people have talked about the time limits, the conditions to unlock the TZ zones. Now, I felt an hour was fine, but I did also think that the random nature could use a little tweaking, in that it was a little too random. Like you would end up with the same level sometimes, like really close together. Like I actually followed the path for the first couple days, and I did notice some repeats quite a few times. So I was kind of hoping that they would, I don't know, maybe make it so that they don't repeat as often, especially if you're hoping for, like the cow level, for instance. The last thing you would want is for it to roll like Maggot Layer like 4 times in a row or something. Not that it ever did roll Maggot Layer 4 times in a row, but you kind of get what I'm saying. Like you're hoping that it's going to go from one new terror zone to another new terror zone, not like repeat the same terror zone multiple times. And I mean, a little bit of tweaking would be nice. Just maybe like don't roll this same zone like within like 12 hours. Or I don't even know. I'm sure they could come up with something, because my ideas on that would probably be terrible. And then they have, lastly, I know that there are a lot of voices wanting this in single player. So they said this already, and they talked about how single player and online are like two different entities, and how they can't really make changes on demand in single player. And they don't want to risk like adding something into single player and then screwing it up and then not being able to change it. Because, like, basically, once you log in, update the game, and then log out, if you don't log back in to grab another update, they can't fix anything. So what they're doing is they're using the online live service to test and tweak the terror zones. So basically, as they are going forward, they're changing the way that the terror zone works, in live service. And then they're kind of trying to get it perfected. And I'm assuming that basically what they're getting at with this comment is when they get it perfected, it will probably move this on to offline. And they pretty much say that. They're like, but we want to get this nailed down for ladder play first, and we'll move into looking at it for offline afterwards. So they're not going to bring it to single player first. If you want to play the terror zones, I can pretty much tell you with 100% certainty that basically what they're saying is it's not coming to offline first. So if you want to play the terror zones, you're going to have to play ladder season 2. Afterwards, they're probably going to add it to single player. Everything that this is telling me is that we're most likely going to see terror zones in single player at some point, but it's not their current priority. And then we have this comment about the ladder season timing. And I mean, I've been talking with a lot of people about this, and they constantly ask me the same question. When is ladder season 2 coming? When is ladder season 2 coming? And the answer has always been the same, and it's still the same after PTR is done. And that's pretty much the answer that they gave us right here. They're like, hey, we hear your feedback. We like your feedback, and we're considering extending public test realm to continue and test and reiterate, of course, some of these new update and fixes. So basically what they're getting at is that they like our ideas. They were going to release ladder season 2 after PTR was over, but we came up with some really nice feedback. They're hearing us. They want to implement this feedback, and they're considering delaying season 2 to implement the feedback. And I'm going to ask you guys, what do you think? Would you rather they release the terror zones as they are right now? Or would you rather like another week or two delay while they perfect the terror zones with our feedback? Put it down in the comments. I'd like to hear what you guys have to say. Other than that, there's really not a lot more here to go over. It's nice that they gave us some information, and I hope that if they do make these changes and they do decide to delay season 2 to extend the public test realm a little bit further, that it's for a good reason. I'd like to see some really meaningful changes to these terror zones. I think they can be absolutely excellent additions to the game, but they just needed tweaks. Little tweaks here and there. And it looks like they hear us, and they're going to make these tweaks. They're very much so thinking about it. In fact, they're even talking about trying to get these tweaks in between 2.5 and latter season 2. So this comment right here is literally going over the fact that they're talking about, you know, like patching the game to 2.5, just putting everything in, and then in that like week to 2 week time span in between when 2.5 hits and season 2 starts, they're going to make the changes, test them out, and then when season 2 hits, we'll get the new changes. It's a little bit dangerous, and it's kind of squeezing things in, and I'm not really sure which one they're going to go with. But as I find out more information, I will definitely let you know. Isn't that right, Mr. Knees? Mr. Knees, Mr. Knees, Mr. Knees, Mr. Knees, Mr. Knees. Anyway, as always, I do appreciate you guys and gals watching my videos, even when it's just a news update on Season 2 and Ladder 2.5. And as always, if you want to keep watching, make sure you hit that subscribe button because it really helps out. Say goodbye, Mr. Nimoy. Goodbye, Mr. Nimoy. Goodbye. Say goodbye, Mr. Nimoy. You go say goodbye? You don't know? What about that?